Sheriff detectives say they found the nude body of a 43-year-old woman.
Every nightly newscast reporting the discovery of yet another woman stabbed, strangled, raped, and murdered.
It has happened again.
He would rape each of these women and then, to cover it up, beat them to death, stab them to death.
From 1994 to 2004, Sean Vincent Gillis terrorized Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as he brutally murdered 8 women. But his crimes went far beyond just killing. Gillis dismembered his victims, raped their corpses, kept body parts as twisted souvenirs, and even cannibalized their remains. His acts of unspeakable horror were so vile that even he admitted he was pure evil. While he readily confessed to his chilling crimes and may have shown some genuine remorse, the gruesome details of his murders are enough to cement his legacy as one of the most horrifying killers in history. Sean Vincent Gillis was truly a monster, and his actions will leave you questioning how anyone could ever commit such unimaginable evil. Sean Vincent Gillis was born on June 24, 1962. His mother loved him dearly and called him her little blue-eyed angel. But his childhood was marred by darkness. His father abandoned them and once threatened their lives with a gun. Though they escaped that night, the trauma lingered in Sean's mind. As he grew up, Sean developed an unusual fascination with death and funeral homes. While other kids shied away from such things, he found himself drawn to them. He even snuck into a funeral home with his cousin once.
I tried to kill my cousin once to feel her breath so. How old were you? Oh, we were about 12, 13.
What about funeral homes?
Funeral homes. This will go back to the childhood. I spent a lot of time at my grandmother at a funeral home right across the street. And me and my cousin, we would do morbid things like sleep in the coffins. A lot of people can't believe that, but we do it.
Sean lived what seemed like a normal life on the outside, hanging out with friends and going to movies. But there was always something lurking beneath the surface. As he entered his teenage years, he and his friends found themselves drawn into a dark world of secrets and shadows. They began to take a secret interest in devil worship, sneaking off to watch Satanists practice their chilling rituals. These acts filled them with a mix of fear and excitement, a dangerous thrill that only deepened their bond. At 17, Sean Vincent Gillis briefly reunited with his father, Norman. But when he stumbled upon Norman's collection of gay adult films, disgust washed over him. This moment marked a turning point. He cut ties with his father completely. It's puzzling to think that this encounter left Sean feeling dirty and grossed out, considering the horrific path he would soon embark upon. In 1980, at just 17 years old, Sean was arrested for petty crimes like traffic violations and possession of marijuana, nothing violent yet. After graduating high school, he took a job at a convenience store but lacked ambition and motivation. Then he discovered the dark allure of adult entertainment on the internet, becoming obsessed with websites featuring violent and disturbing content. His computer became his best friend, opening the door to a world filled with depravity. In 1992, Sean's mother, Yvonne, moved to Georgia for work and asked him to join her. He refused and stayed behind, living off her support while indulging in his dark interests. With Yvonne out of state, he had all the time in the world to explore adult entertainment and other sinister online materials. As his obsession grew, so did the suspicion from his neighbors. They found it strange when they heard him howling in the middle of the night. Women felt uneasy around him. He had already been caught peeping into someone's bedroom window. Despite these oddities, Sean Vincent Gillis had not yet crossed into violence, at least not publicly. In 1994, he met Terry Lou Mo through a mutual friend. Surprisingly, they hit it off immediately. Terry thought Sean was sweet and cute, a teddy bear of sorts. They bonded over their love for science fiction and collecting memorabilia. For nearly 9 years, their relationship seemed stable despite Sean's quirks. Terry overlooked Sean's heavy drinking and lack of intimacy, attributing it to his obsession with adult entertainment. Little did she know just how dark his interests truly were. While she went to bed alone most nights, Sean remained glued to his computer screen in a world where nightmares came alive. On March 20th, 1994, everything changed when Sean committed his first brutal murder. He targeted an elderly woman named Brian, who was 81 years old and living in an assisted facility. She left her door unlocked for a nurse who would come in the next morning. Under the cover of darkness, Sean crept inside with malicious intent. When screamed as he attempted to assault her, panic surged through him like ice water. To silence her cries forever, he viciously cut her throat before stabbing her nearly 50 times all over her body. An act so savage it left her disemboweled and nearly decapitated. The next morning, her caretaker discovered Ann's lifeless body. There were no witnesses and no clues pointing to her killer. The horrific murder sent shockwaves through the community and left police baffled with no suspects or leads in sight. Shortly after this gruesome act, Terry moved in with Sean without knowing the monster lurking beneath his surface. For 5 long years, Sean Vincent Gillis managed to keep his dark urges at bay. Some might wonder if his love for Terry kept him in check, but deep down, many doubted it. If there were any other victims during this time, they were likely still unsolved. On January 4th, 1999, that restraint shattered when Gillis murdered Catherine Ann Hall, a 29-year-old sex worker. Catherine willingly entered his car that night, believing it was just another business transaction. But as she performed her act, Sean unleashed a nightmare. He attempted to strangle her with a zip tie he ominously nicknamed the Objectifier. Despite her desperate fight for survival, Sean overpowered her and stabbed her 16 times. Once she lay lifeless, he committed unspeakable acts upon her corpse before mutilating her body. Afterward, he drove to the splash car wash to erase any trace of his horrific crime. In the dead of night, he pulled Catherine's body from his car and laid it on the ground, hidden from the world. No one saw anything. Sean callously dumped Catherine's naked body on a rural road beneath a dead-end sign, where a hunter would later discover her remains. During the autopsy, evidence emerged. Pubic hair found in her mouth would eventually lead to DNA testing. Sean referred to his weapon as the Objectifier, revealing his twisted mindset. It would turn them into an object that I would then deal with. In the wake of this brutal murder, Terry Luemo grew uneasy. Suffering from grand mal seizures, she relied on Sean to drive her to work at a nearby location, just across the street from where he had killed Brian years earlier. Unbeknownst to her, she was living dangerously close to a monster. Only 4 months later, Gillis set his sights on another victim, 52-year-old Hardy Schmidt. For 3 weeks, he stalked her during her morning jogs. On May 30th, 1999, at around 6:30 a.m., Sean ran Hardy down with his car, knocking her into a ditch. He rushed out and strangled her, just enough to instill fear but not enough to kill immediately. After dragging the terrified woman into his vehicle, he drove to a nearby park where he violated and murdered her. After mutilating Hardy's body, he stuffed her naked and bloody remains into his trunk before heading home. The next night, when he picked up Terry after her shift, she complained about a strong odor in the car. Sean brushed it off as having recently hit an animal and promised to clean it up soon. Terry had no idea of the horror hidden in that trunk. On June 1st, Hardy Schmidt's body was discovered by a cyclist in St. James Parish Bayou next to the highway. Initially, her husband became a suspect until DNA evidence cleared him of any wrongdoing. Just months later, Sean Vincent Gillis was hunting again for the perfect prey and soon found it in 36-year-old Joyce Williams. He was captivated by Joyce's beautiful legs, a trait that drew him in like a moth to a flame. On November 12th of that year, he picked her up in Scotlandville and drove her across the Mississippi River to a sugarcane field near Port Allen. There, he strangled Joyce with the Objectifier before taking her lifeless body back home. In a shocking display of depravity, Sean autopsied Joyce's body in the kitchen where he and Terry usually prepared their meals. He violated Joyce's corpse before consuming parts of it, a grotesque act that revealed just how far gone he truly was. After severing one of her legs with a hacksaw and decapitating her, he stuffed the dismembered parts into bags and loaded them into his car. Somehow, Sean managed to clean up the gruesome scene before picking Terry up from work that day. She suspected nothing as she rode alongside him, unaware that just hours earlier he had taken another innocent life. On January 22, 2000, Joyce Williams' remains were discovered in a wooded area in Iberville Parish. Within the same month, Gillis struck again, this time killing 52-year-old sex worker Lillian Robinson using the same zip tie method as before. He hurriedly took Lillian home but didn't have time to indulge in his usual gruesome rituals due to Terry's imminent return from work. A month later, Lillian's body was found near Whiskey Bay. An autopsy revealed she had drowned after being tossed off a bridge, a horrifying fate at the hands of a man who could no longer control his monstrous impulses. In October of that same year, tragedy struck again when 38-year-old Marilyn Neveles fell victim to Sean's sadistic path near Lafayette. She managed to escape momentarily but was caught again and beaten to death with a steel rod before being dumped into the Mississippi River levee near Baton Rouge. Marilyn's decomposing body was discovered on Halloween, a chilling reminder of the evil lurking within their community. As the investigation into the chilling murders continued, police began to focus on new crimes that sent shivers down the spines of Baton Rouge residents. In August 2002, a task force was formed to catch the elusive Baton Rouge killer. Profilers warned them to look for a white male, likely a loner raised by his mother, someone obsessed with knives and driven by a monstrous desire to kill. This was no ordinary predator. He was a monster who felt like a god in his twisted universe. In May 2003, the police arrested a 34-year-old man named Derek Todd Lee for a string of murders, and the media celebrated, believing they had caught the infamous killer. But little did they know, another monster lurked in the shadows, Sean Vincent Gillis. Obsessed with Lee, Gillis created a file on his computer labeled DTL, filled with news articles and photos about Lee's crimes. He became infatuated with his competitor, watching as Lee taunted police and evaded justice. Terry Lou M.O., Sean's girlfriend, noticed he was putting an unusual number of miles on their car. She assumed he was cheating on her, but in reality, Sean was stalking and planning his next horrific kill. In October 2003, he crossed a terrifying line. He murdered someone he had known for 10 years, Joni Mae Williams, a divorced mother of 3 and sex worker. They had partied together and shared laughs, but that night would end in unimaginable horror. Sean drove Joni to a secluded area where he brutally beat her before intimately violating her. He strangled her and stabbed her repeatedly, leaving her body mutilated in ways that would haunt anyone who heard the details. When police discovered Joni's remains, they found her hands had been removed, a gruesome signature of Gillis's depravity. He even confessed later that dismemberment occurred on his kitchen floor, where blood stained the tiles. Sean's final victim was 43-year-old Donna Bennett, another sex worker who was intoxicated when he picked her up on February 26, 2004. He strangled her not far from his home and then cut her body apart with horrifying precision. Allegedly, he even consumed parts of her flesh, a monstrous act that showed just how far his evil desires had spiraled out of control. When Donna's body was discovered in a drainage canal the next day, investigators found fresh tire tracks near the crime scene. Armed with crime scene photos and tire impressions, police contacted Goodyear Tire Company to identify what kind of vehicle used those tires. The answer shocked them. It was a white Chevrolet Cavalier, a car owned by only 90 people in Baton Rouge. As detectives began interviewing everyone on that list, hopes rose that they might finally connect the dots leading to the killer behind all these bodies. Among them was Sean Vincent Gillis, number 26 on the list of tire owners. He had no criminal record and wasn't even considered a suspect when detectives knocked on his door. But during their questioning, Sean made suspicious statements about Joni Mae Williams, admitting she was not only a friend but had also been in his car recently. He claimed he had been in the area of the crime scene because he needed to relieve himself, a flimsy excuse that did nothing to convince investigators. When asked if they would find Joni's blood in his car, Gillis casually replied yes, claiming she had gotten her period accidentally while sitting in his front seat. His absurd excuse about how blood could have ended up there sounded more like a bad joke than an explanation for such a horrific crime. As police delved deeper into Sean Vincent Gillis's life and actions, it became clear they were dealing with a cunning predator who managed to evade capture while leaving behind a trail of terror and tragedy throughout Baton Rouge. Major Brian White had a chilling realization. He had caught the other Baton Rouge killer. The moment Sean Vincent Gillis blamed the wind during his police interview, White felt a wave of certainty wash over him. He excused himself from the room and immediately ordered DNA analysis on the cheek swab taken from Gillis, along with a search warrant for his car and home. White was confident he had his man, but he knew he couldn't hold Sean indefinitely based on circumstantial evidence alone. Hours dragged on as investigators anxiously awaited lab results and a judge's approval for the warrant. Finally, on April 29, 2004, a SWAT team stormed Gillis's home around 12:20 a.m. Terry Luemo, Sean's girlfriend, was oblivious to the chaos unfolding around her. Police quickly informed her that she had been living with a serial killer, a revelation that shattered her world. Like many partners of killers, she had been completely unaware of the monster hidden behind the facade of love. Terry struggled to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the horrifying truth that now confronted her. "That's not the Sean I knew," she insisted, but the Sean she loved likely never truly existed. As she asked to speak with him, they allowed a phone call. When Terry learned why police arrested him, she laughed in disbelief, thinking they must have made a mistake. But when they revealed that Sean had confessed, her laughter turned to shock. During their conversation, when Terry questioned Sean about his crimes, he chillingly admitted to everything. Armed with a search warrant, detectives uncovered an arsenal of weapons in his home. 7 swords, several knives, a machete, a 14-inch bayonet, wooden clubs, and zip ties, his tools of terror. They also seized computers filled with grotesque photographs of Joni Mae Williams's body and disturbing books about serial killers. On his computer, investigators found files detailing Russian necrophilia and gruesome murders like the Manson family killings and various beheadings. Justice was finally closing in on Sean Vincent Gillis, and there was no escaping it now. In an astonishing confession at 7 a.m., Gillis admitted to murdering 8 women. However, his taped confession was deemed inadmissible in court because he had requested an attorney just before boasting about his crimes. He recounted each murder in grotesque detail, laughing and joking about the sick acts he committed against his victims. He even revealed his favorite weapon, the objectifier, a white nylon zip tie measuring 2.5 feet long. Gillis described how he played with Donna Johnston's remains at his house, washing her body in the shower and even painting her nails post-mortem. His chilling nonchalance about these horrific acts showcased just how deeply disturbed he truly was. The investigation into Sean Vincent Gillis revealed not just a killer but a monster who reveled in his gruesome acts. A predator who stalked and tortured innocent women while hiding behind the mask of an ordinary life. As police pieced together evidence from his confessions and the horrors found in his home, it became clear that justice would be served for those whose lives he so callously extinguished. The streets of Baton Rouge would never forget the terror that lurked within their midst, a reminder that evil can wear many faces and often hides in plain sight. None of the gruesome details of Sean Vincent Gillis's confessions could be used at trial, but Major Brian White was determined not to let a serial killer slip through the cracks on a mere technicality. The authorities needed hard, irrefutable evidence to secure a conviction, and fortune smiled upon them when the search of Sean's home revealed a chilling trove of evidence. 45 digital photos of Donna Bennett Johnston, including one showing her lifeless body in the trunk of his car. But that was just the beginning. Disturbingly, photographs of his other victims were also found, with one image even capturing Sean's license plate alongside one of the bodies. If that wasn't horrifying enough, Sean had kept some of his victims' body parts as macabre souvenirs, trophies from his heinous crimes. There is no doubt that Gillis is among America's most monstrous killers. Psychologist Joni Johnson described him as someone whose thrill came not from the act of killing itself but from what happened afterward. He's attracted to the body parts of these dead corpses, she said, highlighting a rare and disturbing fascination. FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Loughlin revealed an even darker secret. Sean had confessed to her that he was attracted to his own mother. He chillingly remarked that if she had passed away, they might have found him in bed with her. One can only wonder if his mother ever sensed something was off about her son. Was that why she moved to Georgia and continued to financially support him while he lived alone in Baton Rouge? In a twist of fate, a longtime friend of Joni Johnston named Tammy Papera began writing letters to Gillis, and shockingly, he responded. In those letters, he detailed the brutal killing of Johnston, revealing his twisted psyche. "I still puzzle over the post-mortem dismemberment. I was pure evil that night. No love, no compassion, no faith, no mercy." Tammy sadly passed away in 2005 from a long-term illness, but not before turning those chilling letters over to police as crucial evidence for future convictions. It was Tammy who ultimately put the final nail in Sean's coffin. As the trial approached, the prosecutor hoped for the death penalty, but jurors were split and could not reach a unanimous decision. One juror even claimed he could never agree to a death sentence, a sentiment that seemed almost absurd in light of Gillis's atrocities. Meanwhile, another juror expressed a desire to be part of a firing squad if it meant delivering justice to this monster. On July 21, 2008, Gillis was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The previous year, he had pleaded guilty to the murder of Joyce Williams and received another life sentence for that crime. Now at 60 years old, he spends his days isolated in Louisiana State Penitentiary, a stark contrast to the vibrant lives stolen from 7 of his victims. According to an interview with Crime Watch Daily, Terry Luemo still resides in the house she shared with Gillis. She insists that the house itself is just a building and holds no evil energy. Strangely enough, she still keeps the bloody Chevy Cavalier used during his reign of terror, a rusting hunk of metal rotting away in her backyard. Despite renovating her home and claiming it carries no negativity, one can only wonder how she would feel if she came home to find her partner playing with his victims on their kitchen floor. People cope in different ways. Perhaps Terry has found solace in denial. As for Sean Vincent Gillis, one can only hope he does his coping in hell or somewhere equally fitting for a man who brought so much pain and suffering into this world. Rest in peace to all the victims mentioned in this horrific tale.